Why, hello everybody. There's several people I know here. So today in this lecture, I was given this task of doing a lecture on the Dearborn libraries, and really, it's impossible to do a complete lecture, let's be honest. And so I'm very much, you kind of heard it with all the various internships and things I've done. I tend to be very much a 18th, 19th, early 20th century kind of guy. And so today we're going to focus more on the early history of the Dearborn libraries. I'm really going to kind of talk about some of the 19th century origins. We're going to go up through the 20th century and basically kind of finish up with the opening of this building in 1969, basically. With this presentation, I wanted to use it as kind of an excuse to really try to learn more about where people were getting their books in the early 1900s, what was going on, going into a little more detail on Bryant Library and what was going on exactly in the community in the early days in regards to books. So, with this, it's going to be a lot of me sharing photos. There's going to be a lot of monthly and annual reports in here, a little bit of snippets in there, because to kind of make this more an exciting story, I really dug in and kind of copied my favorite little bits. Now, let's see. All right, so I know we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Dearborn Public Library, but the first library of any real sort in Dearborn is basically in the mid-1800s at, these two people's house, Hubbard and Lydia Hidden. They lived on Monroe Street, and surprisingly, the house still stands. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So their home is actually the oldest home still standing in Dearborn. It got moved to Porter Street around the 1910s and got converted into a duplex, but the building still stands. And like I said here on the case, or on the slide, their bookcase consisted of basically 50 worn books. Mr. Hidden is a teacher at the upstairs downstairs school, which that is the public school for Dearborn at that point. That's the village school that exists in Dearborn. Would have been pretty much the corner of Monroe and Park Street is where it was. It's a building built in 1857. And let's see. This is the house. So like I said, this is the OG Dearborn Library. So Mr. Hidden is investing in this library because education at that point in the 19th century in Michigan is truly terrible. It really is. Like Michigan didn't get a public education system at all till 1868. Yeah, keep that in mind. If you wanted to send your kid to school more, you had to pay more in taxes until 1868, which to me is just absolutely ridiculous. The local schools that existed in the various townships in Michigan were very badly funded. Books were just minimal, and Mr. Hidden is basically going out of his way to supply books to the students. That's what's going on here. And it really is inexcusable because books are readily available in the 19th century, especially here in Dearborn. We are close to Detroit. What bookstores that existed in Michigan at the time, they're in Detroit. You just ride a train into Detroit. I go through 1830s newspaper ads all the time, and there's these bookstore ads that tell you, all this great selection of new titles. And so on the right of the slide, there's a report from Wayne County. It's an inspection of the school that kind of tells you how bad education was. 1890, there's one line in there, basically, dictionaries. No, please get one. Yeah, there's other lines like maps, badly mixed. Education was a shambles. You didn't have truancy laws of any real teeth until the 1920s. And so, like I said, there's, with these early librarians in this area, there's definitely a crusade to improve elementary education going on here. That's really the first crisis that with the libraries that open up, you really need to fix. So you also have a school library that, after Hubbard Hidden is gone, is open up in the upstairs of this guy, Joe Cronague's barbershop. Basically 1880 until it burns down in 1907. You also have on the east side, kind of the south end area, Salina, there's a separate whole school library that exists down then in the late 19th century as well. But, notice I gave you 2 examples. There's a lot more other schools out there. We don't really have any real record of them having any consequential library. So, based on the report I mentioned, if you went to like the predecessor of Crestwood at that time, which was a 1-room school, or any of these others that are out in the other area, you might have some McGuffey readers, and that's about it for books. Good luck on anything else. Because like I said, the taxpayer system in the late 1800s was miserable. Schools had no funding, and teachers were badly, much more miserably paid than even today. All right, so the Garden Club, the Dearborn Garden Club, basically are responsible for really changing things. A lot of those prime people that you're aware of in this town, Catherine Bryant, Clara Ford, Clara Snow, others, they're kind of labeled here toward the bottom. Let's see. Catherine Bryant, there's Clara Ford right there. They're basically all the well-established ladies in this town. And they have money for charity. They're trying to figure out in 1919, what do we want to do with this? What way can we actually better the town? At this point, Dearborn is starting to rapidly grow. So you have a tractor plant that is established in the west side where like the Ford Engineering Lab is now. That triggers a huge amount of subdivisions to grow in the west side. Population's growing like crazy. Dearborn's going from maybe 1,000 people to suddenly being 5,000. By the end of the decade, it's going to be 10,000 people. And it's a lot of the people here on the west side, they're a little bit wealthier than on the east side. And, like I said, there's this demand, let's go use our money for a library. Oops. All right, so one of the first things they do in the step in going after a new library is hire this person. Isabel Chafin. She's kind of the founding mother of the Dearborn library system. You see that career there, 1921 through 47. Like 26 years of being the chief librarian of Dearborn Libraries. The first 26 years. She, if you look there, professionally educated in Massachusetts, from Worcester, Massachusetts. They go through a long process, the Garden Club, along with the library commission that's formed, and end up hiring her. So, this building, many of you probably recognize, my museum's Commandant's Quarters ends up becoming the first library. So at first, like Isabel Chafin's project and the Garden Club's project, it ends up being a unit of the school district. And this is, Dearborn Public Schools number 7, which it's kind of an odd history here of what, the organizational history of the Dearborn Libraries is weird because it starts off as a unit of the school district and not today's Dearborn Public Schools. It's basically what is effectively now Dearborn Heights District number 7. Yeah, I kind of find that a little bit weird and funny. The first library is over here in the Commandant's Quarters. The left side, first floor, today we call it the Arsenal Room there. And it was just one room, that is the library. At that point, this is Dearborn Village Hall. The Dearborn Village government is what's there. It's not even Township Hall or anything. Yeah, it's small. If you look, you see here on the screen, the collection starts with just 35 magazines. Just 35. This is a couple months later, around June 21, you start having books checked out. So the reason why, like this year, we're calling this the 100th anniversary of the Dearborn Library System here is because Dearborn Township had an election and in 1922 took over the library. And they're starting with this building. Like they're taking over the library in the Commandant's Quarters. All right, so this is the Commandant's Quarters, around 1923. Has the Dearborn Public Library sign on it. As you can tell, there's Christmas decorations here. This is just some fun, to give you a sense of what the library was like around its first year. So yeah, circulation, about 1,500. 500 adults with library cards, about another 300 children. That may sound bad, but you got to understand, around 1922, the population is 3,000 to 4,000, I would say, of Dearborn. Because at this point, Dearborn is not merged with Fordson. It's just the west side. It's the village of Dearborn. And a lot of the growth that happens in Dearborn is more like 1925, 26, 27, 28. And so these numbers are actually pretty good. What's also interesting too is the whole thing about 20% of people being outside of the village. When you go through some of the reports for it, you have a lot of people using this library from what's now Taylor or Garden City or Dearborn Heights or Inkster, places like that. Because Dearborn is ahead of many of these communities on the development of a library. Yeah, also, Dearborn High is basically right next to Bryant Library and the Commandant's quarters. This whole thing about school children crowding it's going to be a constant theme. All right, so the library has this fun booklet in their collection that's just their entire collection in 1923. I just put up here some basically European history and American history books that they have. Bulk of, what you see on the screen is like the bulk of their European history titles and U.S. history titles. It's not much. Let's just say that. It's 2,700 books total in 1923. It goes up a lot by 1927, to 15,000. But like I said, you get a sense here at least of what they had. All right. Now on to Bryant Library. All right, so a lot of you probably know this was kind of the child of Clara Ford. Clara repeatedly to the Garden Club and to the local authorities offered this land, for this site. Before 1923, where Bryant Library was basically just an empty plot of ground. Never got developed at all. Cost $150,000, built with Indiana limestone. If you go through, there's a whole digital collection of Indiana limestone pics, and over at the Indiana University Libraries, they have a bunch of construction pictures of this building being built. The guy who built it, Edward Tilton, also responsible for the McGregor Library in Highland Park, which it's fitting. It's the other city with huge Ford ties. Yeah, some more pictures here of the library being built. Clara Ford, obviously there at the groundbreaking. Does anybody know who the guy on the left is? Why is he famous, besides the Ford last name? Yeah, he's the first mayor of Dearborn eventually. Let's just say, don't look into his politics. He's not good. Let's just say that. So I threw this in here. This was in the Detroit Free Press, just kind of previewing. You got Isabel Chafin's in this thing, Henry Ford, you got the Fords here, just kind of previewing the brand new Dearborn Library coming. And they're like, oh, we included this architectural drawing because we had trouble with taking a decent picture with the trees. So the library opens in 24. And really, I just kind of wanted to skip ahead a couple of years. The murals inside here, get built in 1927 by this gentleman, Paul Honore. I'm sure I'm butchering the name. Several names in here I'm probably butchering. They're called Aspiration to Knowledge and Application of Knowledge. This gentleman, he's educated at Cass Tech, known for murals, woodcut prints. This other picture there is him in Midland. And if you've ever been to Midland, Michigan, the courthouse there, built in the 20s, same time period as the murals in the Bryant Library, is truly a masterwork. It's got the most amazing, designs of beautiful kind of plastic work on the outside that Honore also carved. And it's another example of this guy was basically a genius, did amazing artwork. And this is just, like I said, the artwork in the Bryant Library is just one of many examples. He's doing People's Church in East Lansing, did work at the Michigan Building at the Chicago World's Fair, and so on. The Masonic Temple. This is another one, this World War I artwork I just thought was really cool. Doing kind of a defense poster for Michigan, honoring the role of women. And obviously we got the fireplaces. In talking about Bryant Library, I just wanted to point out just some things about the fireplaces. These are done by using Pewabic pottery tiles. A lot of you probably know the basic details. Yeah, started by Mary Chase Stratton, 1908 in Detroit. The one that's in the former kids' room, it's based on the book The Baby Opera. It's fun little trivia. I'll just say that. That's why it's got all the weird, sheep and everything else on it. So yeah, this is Bryant Library when it was open. And you've got to understand, this is the main branch. And if you go through Dearborn Library records, like I was doing for this, all the main library references generally, it's always referring to Bryant. It's kind of weird in a way because, so when the city merges with Fordson in 1929, you have this weird imbalance where Bryant Library is on the west side, where there's about 10,000 people. Fordson has about 30,000 people. So here we are, we have like the nice big library. It's over in the end of town where there's less people. Yeah. Right, here's the children's department. You could see the fireplace with the Pewabic pottery right over here. This is a nice like late 20s postcard. All right, so throughout this, I have several clippings from various reports because they were really fun at times. This is to me kind of an example of almost social media fads in the 1930s. People are just going crazy for word contest. I assume they're talking about crosswords, but I'm not 100% certain in here. People are going to the library demanding, I want to check out a dictionary overnight. Going out and besieging the reference desk with these requests of being able to look out dictionaries. And it mentions like in Detroit, at the Detroit Library, they end up charging a fee for people, borrowing a dictionary more than 15 minutes. Yeah, like I said, libraries and other places sometimes today struggle with social media trends. This is the same thing. Like it's the trends, the social trend of the day. People are, trying to beat each other on word contests. So, of course, the libraries are having to deal with the consequence. But yeah, this is March 1932. Another kind of fun thing. You may know that like in Dearborn in the 20s and 30s, this town was kind of aviation crazy. You had Ford Airport where the test track is now in Oakwood. And you had the Ford Tri-Motors being built here, which created this whole demand for people to check out aviation library books. And of course, there's this demand, people are making models. And one of the things the library did was create a whole model display of various things. Yeah, this is the thing too. A lot of these reports tell you a lot about the time period when they're being written. So this is just books in demand, February 1933. At this point, it's the peak of the Great Depression. And people are wanting all sorts of things. They're wanting to learn trades because they've lost their Ford job. They're struggling at their farm place. Maybe they're living out at like Southwest Dearborn on some open land. They got some chicken coops. And they want to go to the library and learn things, learn new skills in woodworking or carpentry or, fixing up their furniture. They don't have money, and so they're doing all these different, new trades. And this was just fun. I tried to copy a bunch of reference requests in here. They're talking about, the library staff were heavily involved in this book, the Henley's 20th Century Formulas. People are wanting, formulas for making soap, for, beekeeping, information on beekeeping. Also I like the moot beer part, like weak beers. If you know moot beer, it's basically like the 3% alcohol beer. Like suddenly that's legalized. And so as a result, there's this demand to learn, brewing in this area. And that's kind of reflected in this report. I just kind of like that as well. Like I said, these reports are great for just like for getting pop culture tastes of the time period. Like I said, this is an annual or a monthly report written by the chief librarian, directed to like the library commission, explaining which books are popular. This one may be my favorite. So if you know anything about astronomy, Pluto was discovered around 1930. Yeah, so in 1934 when this is written, Pluto is very new. And the woman basically comes to the Dearborn Library desk, here at Bryant and asking, I'm looking for information on this new star, Pluto. Yeah, and everybody's struggling. The staff, they're probably not extremely well versed in science. They probably didn't get science degrees, and they're like, "Are you sure you got that information right? Are you sure?" And yes, I'm sure. I went to Detroit. I went to Highland Park. They didn't have anything on it, and finally they mentioned they go to the trusty World Almanac, and the World Almanac has a whole big detail on the newly discovered Pluto. Yeah. And like, it's not, you're talking a pre-internet age, this place, they're not necessarily going to have clipping files on everything here on brand new planets. So yeah, that's how you find out on Pluto. Now going on through some of these reports. February 1938, most popular books. This 100 million guinea pigs, to me, is an example of everybody being really jaded by the Great Depression. Because at this point, 100 Million Guinea Pigs is a book about pretty much being experimented on by, the masses being experimented on by corporations. Yeah. Like I said, the fact they're mentioning here, this is most popular for years at this point. They're basically saying, like, yeah, that is a jaded populace. They're just like, they're sick of the Great Depression at this point when you see books like that being popular. And going on through the Depression, Bryant Library especially is just inundated with high schoolers. So, at this point, Dearborn High is in the old Adams Junior High building. At this point, that would be Garrison and Mason Street. So that's pretty close to the library. A lot of these high schoolers are in their lunch breaks, or after school, are hanging out down at Bryant Library. And the librarians are frustrated with it, but at the same time, if you read the text here in this report, there's all sorts of little bits here basically saying, Dearborn has failed its youth. We have this huge population of high schoolers, and we've done nothing for the youth. And it takes till the 50s that the city, bothers to build the Dearborn Youth Center. Even with that, Dearborn has never really been great on building great facilities for young people to hang out, and the librarians really almost feel like they end up being daycare people at times. This is just one of my favorite photos, honestly. I'm kind of going chronological here through Bryant Library. I just like this photo, honestly. I've posted a few. I know I posted on the museum's Facebook at one point. So World War II. You get to World War II at Bryant Library, and everybody is basically going there for classes. That's the big thing. The chief librarian's talking about, our circulation's way down, basically because the men are overseas. Everybody's going. They're also, the libraries are suffering from the fact that people don't have gas for their cars because it's being rationed. So they can't just go to the library at a spur of the moment. And at this point, there's not really that many branch libraries. People can't. You have the one here in the West. You have one in East Dearborn, and that's it. And so if you don't have gas in your car, it's not really that convenient to go to the library. Yeah, something's never changed in these reports. Yeah, griping about young people, it's... I'm sure if I read some reports the same way from 1985 and the like, they would sound the same. Their reports here are just complaints about young people liking it noisy. And they're like, young people used to new technology where, they're playing music and other things. And the older customers that we have here at the library are used to things being quiet. Yeah, like I said, I was amused by this as words in 1945. All right, this photo, how many of you here went to the reference department all the time at the library? I'm just saying. Several of you here. I'm a millennial. I am not used to this. This is weird for me. Like, let's skip ahead to the next photo, but doing things like this the students researching colleges, part of me, this would freak me out. I just, yeah. The idea of having to go out of your way to the library to figure out which college you're doing, or, I mean, there's the monthly reports talk about people going to the library to look at job boards and figure out what sort of training they need for their jobs, where they can find their next job lead, especially during the Depression. Yeah, that is, I got to be honest, as a millennial, that is a completely foreign concept to me. But you could see like why in a picture like this from 1959, it is crazy busy. And you look at the sorts of questions the librarians in these various months, they're getting into the thousands of questions of all sorts, because this is your only real way of getting information in the 50s. This is one, yeah, the library shared this picture before, but early model copy machine. Yeah, here at Bryant Library. I know some people complain today about 25-cent copy machines. 25 cents in 1963. Yeah, you imagine going there, looking at your college catalogs, you want to copy a page for reference, and you spent like how many dollars in 1963 money? That's a lot of money, but like at that point, copy machine technology is new, to be fair. All right, so I'm going to kind of give you an overview history of the various other branches too. This is the one solidly the number 2 branch in the city for much of the early history. As I said, this is the one that was open to serve Fordson. So technically, before Fordson and Dearborn merged, Fordson did not have a public library system at all. The school district system in Fordson was the library system. So the City Hall branch was originally conceived, it was going to be like almost a Library of Congress for city employees. It was originally going to be this room in City Hall where it was meant for like the mayor, department heads, and maybe some city employees. But very quickly, when they started stuffing it with books, they realized, oh my God, people actually want to go to a library here. Because like it's the east side at that point of like 40,000, 50,000 people in the city. It's like 30,000 of them are living right over there by City Hall. So of course there's going to be demand. It's the thing, they quickly, when they open this, it's the demand outstrips what space they have. And they keep having to move it several times. It's always, the space is always inadequate. This picture, I think this is one of the opening in the 50s, of one of their new locations in the 50s, if I remember right, in these newspaper images. Yeah, this is suffered from a huge amount of traffic. A lot of East Side people who just never went to the West End, there's stories of East End people always thinking that this was the main branch of the public library. And here's another photo from the 40s. Like I said, it's a busy branch. It's something we don't remember today because when Henry Ford Centennial Library opens, this closes within 2 years. So this has been gone for 50 years. Yeah, I kind of went through our photo files at the museum and just kind of included in this presentation, just fun stuff here. This photo book charging system, as an archivist at a museum, I didn't know anything about charging systems. These are just for checking out books in the old days. And what this one does is basically take a photograph of your library card and takes a photograph of the record card for the book itself. It's an improvement over the previous systems where more information had to be recorded. This is basically saving paperwork for librarians is what's going on. And of course, because it's a nice little improvement, of course the city photographers here in Dearborn had to photograph it because Dearborn city photographers like to photograph everything. Yeah, we have just huge amounts of, we have way more photos of various random stuff, believe me, it's, like, if I had time to dig through our photo files at the museum, I could find so much more random stuff on the library. It would be crazy because at the museum, there's probably 400,000 to 500,000 images of various city government things in our negative collection that are arranged by date, but not by subject. Yeah. And just because of the charging system thing, I threw this in here, just an image of a library card, in our files at the museum. Mr. Bill Sherman here. This is an address in the Snow Woods neighborhood, but I just thought, like, today's library cards look a little bit different.
That's nice.
Yeah. All right, just some more reference requests here, because reference requests are fun. 1932, George Washington, I think it's his 200th birthday then. So, of course, people in 1932 at the City Hall branch are curious about their presidents, especially around President's Day. And of course, you crossword people out there have to be asking questions in 1932 about, African animals, apparently. And yeah, it just seems like the librarians here just have an obsession over the World Almanac. World Almanac is giving them all their answers. Michigan manuals, we have Michigan manuals at the museum. I've never used them, and yet apparently here, people are finding them the holy grail for their Michigan geography. All right, so I've kind of hinted at some of the stuff already with the Depression. The City Hall branch is kind of at the epicenter of it. Libraries are really front and foremost. They're noticing all the problems that are going on in Dearborn, because Dearborn in the 30s is basically pure chaos. Like, if you ever want to know what the most Wild West period in Dearborn is, it's the 1930s. And this photo here, for example, this is just a mob of people pretty much who are unemployed at Ford expressing their grievances in front of City Hall. And it's in the libraries, they're noticing this. The librarians are noting in the reports that large number of people are changing their addresses because they're having trouble trying to find a consistent home. Is the issue. People are having their things stolen at the branches. Books are being stolen. It's a problem. But what's also interesting, during the Depression, you got to remember in the 1930s, the Wayne County suburbs are not very heavily populated. And so, the east side of Dearborn here is actually requesting the most of any branch, requesting, I think, nearly half of all interlibrary loans from the whole Wayne County library system, which is kind of crazy to me. Now, going through these branches, I threw this in here, a report from 51-52, just to give you a sense of which were the busy branches. So, obviously, main library, that's Bryant branch. The City Hall branch. So these other ones, like the Northeast and Southeast branch, they're going to open later. But if you talk about, say, before about 1940, the City Hall branch is probably doing close to 40%, if not more, of all circulation in the library system. These new locations are really kind of draining away some of the business from it, like the Bookmobile. Anybody remember the Bookmobile? Yeah, this only had a pretty limited run, honestly. I was a little bit surprised. I've seen Bookmobiles in other cities have much longer runs than this. This is only running for 19 years, starting in 49. This starts as a project because they realize that there's big chunks of Dearborn that don't really have access to libraries. You only have usually about 2 staff with it, and yet, if you saw in the previous slide, there in the bottom, that's doing better circulation numbers than several of the other branches. It's doing well. It's a little bit surprising, the city's decision not to continue funding it, honestly. Not to get it. Well, the truck basically broke down is what happened, and the city decided, we've just opened Henry Ford Centennial Library. We don't need to buy a new truck. All right, so the Southeast branch here. This is one, even though it's been shut down for 50 years, this building still stands. So, opens in 1941. This is the only Dearborn library that you could say was a WAPA project, funded with Depression relief money. Opens in 41, 2021 Salina Street. The building is still there. It's the Yemen American Benevolent Association that owns the place. Very early on, if you know the South End, that neighborhood, you had 50 languages spoken around 1950. So you look at the reports, they're trying to figure out, how do we serve this population? Even in 1941, the population of the neighborhood is really kind of on a downswing, and they're struggling. The library system is trying to struggle. This neighborhood of 10,000 people, how do we, that's speaking so many languages, how do we affordably provide a huge amount of foreign language books. And they finally, they go ask some demographers and figure out what are the most common languages spoken in this neighborhood. And they basically go for like the 10 most popular languages spoken, and they buy some books for that. It's not Arabic though. That's a little bit surprising. The list that they did, it was things like Ukrainian, Norwegian, Romanian, things like that. And Polish, obviously. Polish was one that got a ton of, apparently there's a ton of Polish people. Skip ahead really quick. This photo here of the southeast branch, let's see. It's really tiny, you can't really see it, but there's a sign right here that says Polish books. Can't really see, but there's like metal ceiling tiles here in the building over here that are really kind of cool looking. The same one in the reports, you have some of the same librarians who are complaining about young people being loud, who are also being like, they first go to the southeast branch and they're like, oh, these kids, they keep going here, they're filling the place, they're studying. And then, the chief librarian notes, the same librarian goes to visit some of these houses for overdue books. Which, by the way, actually, that blew my mind that like librarians would actually go in person to visit houses for overdue books. Can you imagine people doing that today? No. Exactly. Get shot, yes. Like that's something like that would happen. But in these reports, they're noting that these librarians are going to visit South End homes to collect overdue books. And they're basically seeing what's going on in the South End. Some of the poorest people in Dearborn, even in the 1940s, they're living in the South End. And they're going there noticing that these are horrible home life conditions. I mean, we have other collections, for the police at the museum that talk about the South End at that point around 41 being, a hotbed for illegal gambling and prostitution and all sorts of other things going on. And so the librarians are seeing what's going on and even the most, hard-blooded, librarian is like, yes, kid, feel free to do your studying at the library. Yeah. By the way, this is this photo here. Totally unrelated to libraries. I just like it. It's a Salina school cleanup parade in the mid-50s. Basically, the neighborhood's so ridiculously diverse that there's basically images of these kids being like, whatever your language you're speaking, it doesn't matter. We're all human beings. All right, the northeast branch here. This is one that started in a storefront. They were trying to find a permanent location for it, and it was kind of interesting that people were complaining the new location was going to be next to a bar. I don't know, some of you might like your library next to a bar. I mean, yeah. Well, there are people complaining, this library is going to have story hours. We can't have the kids getting out and being next to a bar. Yeah, so they end up in their current location, 929 Warren, 1953. And this is a few years later, 1961, gets dedicated after Anthony Esper. And, this building out here, that's still there today, that building. Anthony Esper, he was in the city council for 24 years. Later on in life, got in the insurance business, used to farm at that property site there. In general, like Northeast Dearborn, it's full of the Esper family, let's be honest. There's the Espers, the Schaefers, everybody kind of was very interrelated in that area. But yeah, it's fascinating that the library, they chose Anthony Esper to name it after. Well, he's still, he's still alive and kicking. Same thing, kind of interesting. Clara Snow is alive for several more years, and yet they decide to name the Southwest Dearborn branch after her as well. So yeah, this is another one when you go through it and look at the records, everybody's feuding like usual in city politics over where to put this. Various different sites are proposed. Finally, it's chosen, at corner of Princeton and Telegraph. It's opened in 1960, named after Clara Snow, who was, you remember back in the Garden Club bit, she was there involved with the Garden Club in the creation of the Dearborn libraries. Very much involved in the creation of libraries in Dearborn overall. But unfortunately, this one closed in 2011. Well, so we have a bunch of stuff. Here's kind of the artist conception, 1957. So they actually demolished a house for the library. No library, the house that was there before the library being torn down. Then, of course, Orville Hubbard, he has to claim credit for everything. So he's like, bringing you a brand new library. Because that's Orville Hubbard for you, basically, you know. And here's your finished project, in 1965. Okay, for those of you who can't remember, here's some photos from 1960. I got to be honest, I prefer the interior of the southeast branch. I want those metal tile or metal roofs. All right, proposed but never built. Yeah, Northwest Dearborn. A lot of people in Northwest Dearborn, Levelgood Park area wanted one. But of course, city politics got in the way because that's kind of how Dearborn goes sometimes. You know, there were so many debates over where to put a Northwest Dearborn branch, and either people complain about using Levelgood Park for it, or there, you know, other open properties. The city people, neighbors didn't want a library next to them, and so after several years of infighting, yep, nothing happens in Northwest Dearborn, which is unfortunate. But with all these libraries going open, there were interesting loan programs. And my favorite, World War II, cargo plane pilots getting books. So as I said here, for a lot of the early history, the Dearborn Library is the main library around. There's no big library in Wayne. It's basically like one room at that point in World War II. There's no big Romulus library. And so these World War II cargo plane pilots, based at what's now Detroit Metro, actually are able to borrow books here from the Dearborn Library, and they're given extended loans, allowing them to borrow these books while they're doing missions in India. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. This photo here is Valley Farm, which, if you know the old Gully homestead, this corner of Gully and Michigan Avenue was sold by the Gully family to Henry Ford, and he had a boys' school there for a bit, and then Clara Ford turned it into basically a home for unwed mothers. Unwed pregnant mothers, I'm trying to say. It was operated by the Detroit Women's Hospital, and for several years in the 30s, the Dearborn Public Library had a book loan program with this facility going on. So later on, this place, after it closes, it becomes an Elks home, or Elk Hall. Then I think got torn down for the one Tim Hortons that's out there by Gully. Yeah. And also just Oakwood Hospital. I just found that was interesting too. All right, now on to my sort of finale here. All right. So this building. This is all a product, obviously, the Henry Ford Centennial. 1963, big party. Lots of money being invested in Dearborn at the time. Ford Motor Company is shilling out the money. At this point, this is like 1 year after the Ford Rotunda burns down, so Ford is probably guilty about not rebuilding that. And so Ford offers up $3 million for a brand new library here on the former Fairlane farm. So before 1963, this is still Ford land. This is still some of the land that Henry Ford acquired with his estate. That's why it's never been developed. But yeah, like I said, for a new library, Ford offers $3 million for grants. Eventually they throw in another $500,000. This firm here, Harley Ellington and Associates, they are a surprisingly big Detroit firm. I knew nothing about them. I researched them because I was curious. Sometimes with these building projects, I'm curious what these firms are also building in different cities. They did all the newer extensions on the Detroit Institute of Arts. Yeah, they did the Coleman Young Municipal Building in Detroit as well. And you see them, if you do like a Wikipedia search or Google search on the company name, they're responsible for a surprising amount of architecture still to this day. Let's see, what else? Yeah, Barton Marlowe Company of Detroit gets the contract for building it. Ends up being $4.2 million. So like considering Ford paid $3.5 million of this, that's pretty cheap for the city. The city did not have to pay much for this building. The city, the renovations of this building just recently were probably probably way more expensive for the city than anything than the actual construction of this building. So this is using all the marble in this building is from Proctor, Vermont. I was looking at there was 2 different varieties of marble used in this building, all from the same town of Vermont. So yeah, we go from Indiana limestone with Bryant Library to Vermont marble with this building. I'm just thinking, which state do you prefer more from Indiana? Yeah, this is the thing. By the way, like random side note, like in building research in Dearborn, we don't use a lot of Michigan stone here. That's the funny thing. Like you look at buildings here, there's a lot of buildings made with Indiana limestone or Ohio sandstone or things like that. We never use Michigan stone, and that's always disappointing. All right, so here's cornerstone being laid. We have some celebrities here. John Dingell here on the left. Then Clara Snow, 7 years after she gets her own library, she's still around, dedicating the Henry Ford Centennial Library. We have, Roland Marquis on the right, who, many people probably, he was head librarian here for many years. Let's see. Yep. So we have a whole scrapbook of basically construction photos of this building at the museum. Here's your stairway, your various corridors of the building. And I found a newspaper article. It was very interesting to me that the first book that was donated for this building was the Centennial History of Wayne State. Yeah, who would have thought? Yeah, first book for this building. So I had a whole big nice negative set for the grand opening of this facility. There seem to be people posing, in all these different photos. I think this one here on the left, there's a bunch of World Book encyclopedias. Now, I never really read that much about the art in this place, so I was kind of curious. I didn't know that was the name, the Serpentine Wall there in the fountain at the base of the stairs. Created of shale and glazed pottery by Birmingham sculptor Glenn Michaels, who passed away only a couple of years ago. The Library Commission actually visited his studio and saw the piece and thought, oh, this would be great, that go along with the other artwork of his. Here's Glenn Michaels here. And then obviously on the second floor here, his bas relief map, also by the same guy, was in the Ford Pavilion at the New York World's Fair. This was already set to be in the library, and the Serpentine Wall one was they thought, oh, this would be a great piece to pair with this. I found artistic explanations of this map. This map to me, I love it, it's cool. But even though I have a minor in geographic information systems, I cannot explain this map to you at all. The explanation in the dedication booklet for the library was very, very long. Also, the tapestry also by the same guy. Now just my final little slide here. I use city directories all the time, and so I was just tickled to find this photo. Massive collection of telephone books. And I got to be honest with you, if you still have old telephone books for Dearborn, we kind of still need them, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you'd be surprised, especially newer ones. The weird thing, right now, we're trying to document addresses and things in 2022, and it is very impossible to document digital address books. It is very tough to document current addresses of things. So especially modern day telephone books, we do actually need them in archives. But that's it.